Hello, hello, hello. We are on a roll and we're going to dive deep into how creative women lower stress using a four-part brain training blueprint. And we're going to do so in just one moment. Hello there, and welcome to Stress Talk Live with Marcyline. This is the place where we help women over 40 to live healthier lives through strategic stress management and solution focused self care. I'm your host, Marcyline Bailey, and I am so glad that you decided to join me today and allow me into your space just for a few minutes. We've been talking about for the past month, we've been talking about lowering our stress levels. And today we're going to get into it real thick, real deep, because I'm going to share with you a four-part brain training blueprint that you can use to keep your stress levels low, as well as what? Improve your memory and your cognitive functioning. How about that? We're going to kill two birds with one stone today. Yay! But before we get started, as usual, I'm going to ask you to like, follow, and subscribe to Emma Bailey Consultants on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Also, you're going to find more stuff at this link. This will take you to a link to sign up for my newsletter, as well as to other links to learn a little bit more about me and what I offer. And then here's my website. Please just go there and you can learn a lot about me there and what I do. Today, however, we're going to dive really deep. I mean, deep into how we can lower our stress. And we're living in a not error. Well, some people might think it's an error. We're living in an era where there's so much going on. There's so much going on in our communities, in our country, in the world, as well as in our lives. And it's no wonder that people are wondering what the heck is happening and how are we going to manage and maintain with all of this happening around us? Because when there's turmoil around us, it affects us within because it just keeps hitting our stress response, which we all know as fight or flight response, right? It just keeps pumping it and pumping it. And so many of us are walking around stressed, tense, and fearful. What I'm offering today is a blueprint that you can use on the daily. You can use every day to train your brain. Not only will it train your brain uh, so that you can think clearly, so that you can make decisions without struggle, so that you can just do your daily task with greater ease. It will also help to lower your stress levels, lower the stress that you're experiencing because of the activities that you're engaging in while you are training your brain. So, I'm going to get started. Um, yes, I'm going to get started and begin to share. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, just drop them into the chat. And that also goes for anyone who's watching the replay. You can catch the replay on YouTube or Facebook. Um, Facebook or even on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions or any comments, just drop them into the comment section and I will respond. Okay. So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about how creative women lower stress using a 4-part brain training blueprint. And this blueprint that I'm using is not just, I said, creative women, but I'm not talking about creative women in the sense of they're crafty. I'm talking about this is a creative way to lower your stress as you are boosting your mood and again training your brain. Last month, our last session, I talked about brain plasticity. And I'm going to continue that discussion and try to give you a little bit more because I know when I was talking about it, I was just talking about I was just giving kind of an overview. I'm going to give an overview today as a reminder, but I'm going to hopefully share a little bit more about brain plasticity and neuroplasticity. And I'm not a doctor, but these are some of the things that we learn in grad school when we're talking about the brain. And it's also very timely because we um, we need to know how we can train our brain to continue to function and to function efficiently and effectively for us. I mean, oftentimes we think or we've been taught that as we get older our memory begins to slip and that that's natural and normal for our memory to start to fade a bit. We can't recall things as we once did. And I don't know that that's quite accurate. Part of it is that we're not exercising our brain. And when we exercise our brain is able to adapt, not only adapt functionally, it adapts structurally. This is, and scientists and doctors and medical people have learned about brain plasticity and neuroplasticity because when a person when a person experiences a brain injury, what they've learned is that the brain can repair itself, right? It repairs itself. And it repairs itself by developing neural pathways. And it oftentimes will move a certain function from one part of the brain to the other. So if you injure your brain will make corrections. It's like a course correction, like GPS. It course corrects and it draws or develops neural pathways to a different part of the brain so that part of the brain can take over where that for the injured part. Well, when we're really young, let me even start before that. When we're really young, one of the things I shared with you before is that the brain is constantly learning, right? There's a lot of activities. And when babies are young, little, everything is new. Everything is new. Everything is new. It's like, oh, what is that? It's like, oh, when did that happen? How did that happen? Everything is new. And the brain is learning. The brain is taking in all of this information and it's cataloging it so that we can remember it and we can use it in the future, right? So the brain is constantly learning. Because of that, there's a lot of changes that are going on in the brain, structurally and functionally. Lots of changes as we grow. For example, a baby cannot do what a 3-year-old can, right? A 3-year-old can't do what a 10-year-old can. A 10-year-old can't do what a 20-year-old can. That's because the brain is developing, the brain is learning. And so, what happens is when we get to a certain age, we're just not using our brain like we once did. We're not we're not learning new information as we once did. That's why it's so important, and I said this before, it's so important for us to challenge our brains, challenge ourselves to learn new things, new tasks, learn a new way of doing things. If you recall, one of our viewers from last week said that she will oftentimes brush her teeth using her non dominant hand. I'm moving my left hand because that's my non dominant hand. I'm right handed. So I'm very comfortable using my right hand for everything. But if I were to use my non dominant hand, my left hand, I would struggle a bit. And it would take me time to really get the hang of using it, right? But we don't do that. We don't use our brains like that. We finish school and we get into a pattern of habits where we do the same thing every day, all day, every day, and we tend not to challenge ourselves. It is important for us to challenge ourselves because when we challenge our brain, it continues to change again structurally and functionally, and it also continues to learn. And we continue, it stays sharper, right? It stays sharper. I can give you a personal example. Um, on my phone, I have a calculator. And when I'm paying bills or when I'm trying to figure something out, do some mathematical calculations, I'll pull out my phone because it's easy. It's easy for me to pull my phone out, pull up that calculator, and do the computation on my calculator. I'm sure many of you do the same. If you do the same, drop into the chat, me too. Okay? If you use your calculator on your phone to do basic computations, just drop it in. Me too. Well, I do that. What I've started doing, however, is I've started doing calculations by paper and pen, using paper and pen. Because what I found is that when I stopped doing it, it was harder for me to do basic math, adding and subtracting because I didn't practice it, because I wasn't challenging my brain, because I was taking the easy way out. Is that a bad thing? Having a calculator is great. It's perfect. However, sometimes when we're taking the easy way out, we're not allowing our brain to change and to be challenged. So that's one thing that I've just started doing, just to make sure that I'm not settling into that pattern that keeps my brain, that doesn't allow my brain to grow, that doesn't allow my brain to function. Because as I get older, I want to be able to make decisions clearly. I want to be able to analyze things clearly and effectively. I want to be able to remember things. And by doing what I'm going to share with you today, it may help. Now, of course, yes, there's this thing called biology, and just because, and genetics. And so that's going to affect how we remember things, just as that also affects how we handle stress. However, it doesn't hurt to do these exercises, these brain exercises that I'm going to share in order to help you to keep your stress levels down and to increase that brain plasticity that I was sharing with you. Now, is there a downside to brain plasticity? Yeah, there is. And I'll tell you how it is. There is a downside for people who are have addictions. When people have addictions, drug addictions, or if they're addicted to alcohol, the brain changes. It changes structurally as well as functionally. That's the downside to brain plasticity. And that's what, because it changes structurally, that's what increases and causes, cause, inc- makes it harder to break those addictions. We have to work harder to do so. Okay, so let's go on. And I put together a few slides, and I'm gonna put my notes over there so I can see them. And I put together a few slides that I hope are going to help us. Oops, that I hope will help us to. There we go. Um, Help us as we're talking about lowering our stress levels using a four-part brain training blueprint. And this is my blueprint. First and foremost, in order to help our memory, right? Because that's something that many of us are concerned about, memory as we get older. And if we can't remember things, what happens? Stress levels go up. Our stress goes up, right? Because we feel anxious when we forget things, when we can't find things, when we've forgotten to pay a bill that we needed to pay, when we can't find our car keys, when we don't know where we've parked, when we've forgotten an appointment. What happens? Our stress level goes up. So, what can we do in order to take good care? And this is the first part of our brain training blueprint, taking good care. You often hear me say that when I'm ending a statement. I'll say, and take good care. Well, when I say that, I'm talking about mentally, physically, emotionally, as well as um, spiritually, right? When we're taking good care, we're exercising, we are eating healthily, we are spending time with people we care about and who care about us. We're also getting adequate rest. When we are taking good care, we are holistically taking, um, we're looking holistically at our wellness, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We want to take good care. This is the first step in what? The first step of our brain training blueprint. We need to take good care. But there are other things that we can do because when we are taking good care physically, it is going to help us to remember. That's very big. Memory is very big for us, right? And we want to physically feed that by taking good care of ourselves. The other thing that we can do in order to enhance our memory is to use acrostics. Now, those of you who do puzzles, you know what acrostics are. Acrostics are statements that you can use in order to remember. So if anyone who's taken piano lessons knows this phrase, every good boy does fine. That's because every good boy does fine tells us about the letters, the notes on a keyboard. Every good boy does fine, right? We know every good boy does fine. If you've ever played the piano or taken piano lessons, if you've ever played the guitar, this is an acrostic that you learn. An acrostic is a statement that you can create using the letters to remind you of what those letters are and what that statement you want to remember is. That was kind of confusing, but I think you get my point. Another memory technique that you can use is an acronym. Now, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. That's my hometown. And we had to learn the Great Lakes. Well, how do you learn the Great Lakes? You can learn and remember the Great Lakes by using an acronym. An acronym takes the first letter of each word and creates a word. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior are the five Great Lakes. If you look at the first letters of each word, HOMES, it spells the word homes. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. That's an acronym, okay, for the Great Lakes homes. What else can you do in order? Oh, there are other, I'm sorry, before I go on, there are other things that you can do. Chunking. When you learn a phone number, and we don't learn phone numbers anymore, right? Because what? We keep them in our phone. We keep them in our phone, and we don't have to remember them because we can just go to the phone and dial it up or pull up the name, press the button. It calls whoever you want to call. But back in the day, when we had to remember phone numbers because we didn't have these handy dandy phones, we learned them by chunking. Chunking is another way that can help you to remember. Chunking is a way where you chunk or combine information, and the brain looks at it as one piece of information. For example, phone numbers. There was a home improvement company in the Cleveland area, and their jingle was Garfield 1 2 3 2 3, Garfield 1 2 3 2 3. Now I remember that from a long time ago. A long time ago. And for those of you who are in Cleveland, you remember it too, right? Garfield 1 2 3 2 3, Garfield 1 2 3 2 3. Well, in my head, the information, this is a telephone number. I remember Garfield 1 as one piece of information, 2323 as another piece of information. That's how you remember. I learned my grandparents' phone number in a similar way, GA1 and the rest of it, right? And I remember going to a family reunion years ago, and one of our cousins said, "What's your granddaddy's number? Your grandma's number?" And I said GA1, and I gave him the rest of the number, and he started laughing. He said, "GA1? Nobody says that anymore." I said, "Well, that's the way I learned it," and I learned it just that way. So when we're using techniques to help us to remember information, chunking is another way to do it. We combine information so that our brain looks at different pieces, combined pieces of information as one piece of information. Then another way to enhance our memory is it's called a method of loci. Loci? Anyway, what happens is you associate a picture, something that's familiar with what you're trying to remember. So when I talked about ways to enhance your memory, I talked about acrostics, using acrostics. I talked about using acronyms. I talked about chunking, and I talked about method of loci. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, so I apologize. But there are two other ways I want to mention. Visualization. Think about this. You can visualize something that will help you to remember something. For example, you can associate what you're trying to remember with something, with a picture or an image. And when you think about that image, you'll think about the thing that you're trying to remember. The other thing is rhyming or alliteration. You can use rhyming to help you to remember. So we've talked about memory enhancement, and the skills or the strategies that I've shared with you are called mnemonics. I know I'm giving you a lot of information, but let's move on, okay? I've also talked about the importance of diet and exercise and taking good care. That also helps us to remember, helps our brain, and lowers our stress. Let's move on. Digital and analog tools for mental sharpness. Okay, I'm sharing all of this because when we are sharp mentally, we feel better and it lowers our stress levels. So, we found that the best tool for mental sharpness is writing. When you write information down, it helps you to remember and it helps you to with mental sharpness. Now, does that mean we have to throw away all of our digital things? No, that helps us too, especially when it comes to remembering things from the past. We can have what? Scrapbooks. We have pictures. Those are all paper and they're called analog tools. We have diaries. We have journals. All of those things help us to remember. I can remember my grandmother has a book. She had a book. And in that book, it was a red book. It was an address book, actually. It was an address book that she used, and she would sit and just go through it periodically. She would just go through it. And now that I'm older, I understand why she would just read it, because it helped her to remember things. My grandmother lived until she was 102. So it helped her to remember. She kept pictures in there. She had a picture of me as a baby my newborn picture in that book. She also had a picture of me and one of my best friends, childhood friends, at a birthday party in that book. And she would look at that book and she would read it. She would go through. She would look for birth dates in that book. That was her way of keeping sharp. But we have those things, right? We have those kinds of books. We have our journals. We have our pictures. We can also use digital tools because we have Google Photos. We have our phones that we keep pictures on. And if you have if you have Microsoft or even Google, a picture will pop up. Here's a memory from 2 years ago. Here's a memory from 3 years ago. Here's a memory from last week. We've connected memories. Here's a photo album for you to look at, right? So digital tools are really good and it helps us to remain sharp. Reminders, using the reminder on our phone. The little alarm goes off and it tells us, hey, you have an appointment, you have a meeting. Using calendars on our phone helps us to stay sharp mentally because we can use it as a reminder. Okay. Why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about memory enhancement techniques, digital analog tools for mental sharpness? Because using these two tools, which is part of our brain training blueprint, can lower your stress level. Let me go on. I'm going to share with you now, because I know I'm going on and on and on, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to run out of time. What else can we do? Here, we can learn new skills. This is very key. Remember, I talked about understanding brain plasticity. When we learn new skills and challenge our brain, it changes the functioning, right? As well as, excuse me, the structure. What do we do? What are some of the skills that we can learn that help us to train our brain and lower our stress? Learn a new language. Most of us who are watching this, most of you who are watching um, this podcast probably speak English, right? Learn a new language. There are thousands of languages out there because, again, that challenges your brain. Learn a new skill, a creative skill. Learn to paint, learn to draw, learn to photography, pottery. Put that tactile, the feel with what you're doing that help, and it will help your brain. Learn some new physical movements like Tai Chi and yoga. Meditate. That's my thing, mindfulness meditation. All of these things are physical activities that, again, lower your stress and trains your brain. Play games such as chess that require strategic thinking, um, strategic thinking, strategy, where you're having to think ahead. You can't just move the pieces, you have to think what comes next. Do puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, do puzzles like acrostics, right? You can get books, magazines that have acrostics in them. Also, learn computer skills. Your phone is a computer. It's a portable computer. You can do almost anything on your phone, but you need to practice it. I have aunts who text all the time. They can text, and they're in their 80s, their late 80s. I have aunts who go on the computer and they use the computer. They're in their late 80s. That's how they keep their mind sharp. And it doesn't matter that it may take them a while to figure it out. The fact that they're trying to figure it out and that they do figure it out helps their brain because it helps them with recall. And again, it helps those neural pathways, strengthens them and changes them. Learning computer skills. I once said in a joking way that in order that we have to get new things. When I bought my car, there was a learning curve to it, right? Because there were so many new things with the car. I hadn't bought a car in over 10 years. And so when I bought a new car, I literally had to learn how to drive the car. Not the driving part of the car, but how to work the equipment in the car in order to drive the car. When going to the grocery store, you have to, using the self checkout. All of that is new to some people, especially older people. For young people, it's nothing. They don't think anything of it because they've grown up with that kind of technology. But for older people or people like me, I have to sometimes think how to do it. It takes me sometimes a little time to think about it because it's not automatic. But we have to get and utilize some of this new technology in order to keep up with what the changes that are going on in life. Because if we can keep up with the changes, our stress levels are not going to be as high. We're going to have lower stress. Whew, I went through that like, boom. But I hope you'll watch the replay. What I've just talked about is how creative women lower stress using a 4-part brain training blueprint. The first part of that blueprint is to know brain plasticity and to continue to learn. Continue to learn is key, being a lifelong learner. That's number one. Number two is using memory enhancement techniques. And I've shared a number of those with you. Watch the replay so you can write those down and you can start using them. I also talked about using digital and analog tools to improve your mental sharpness. I talked about writing. I talked about reviewing your journal, writing in your journal and reviewing it. I talked about using your phone and those memories that pop up, the pictures, right, on your phone. And then last but not least, learning new skills. All of that is important. When we learn and continue to learn new skills, creative or otherwise, it keeps our stress levels down and it helps us remember. It improves our memory. All right. I hope you'll stick with me as we continue to learn how to keep our stress levels down. And like I said, we're going in deep. This is not your usual, what can I do? And just plug it into your search engine and you can find an answer. Some of those basic things, I'm talking about changes that you can make, skills that you can learn, strategies that you can use that will help you to maintain low stress levels, boost your mood, and have fun doing so. Well, that's all for now. I hope you'll join me next week. I look forward to seeing you. Oh, I'm sorry. We won't be on next week. Why? Because it's the Super Bowl. Yep. Super Bowl. So enjoy the Super Bowl. I hope your team wins. I'm going to be rooting for mine. Take good care. Ah, that's not the one I wanted. Let's go to this one.